الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه من والاه أما بعد. اللهم اغفر لنا ذنوبنا وإسرافنا في أمرنا وثبت أقدامنا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. اللهم نسألك رضاك والجنة ونعوذ بك من سخطك والنار. اللهم إنك عفو واغفر ذنوبنا واختم بالباقي بالصالحات أعمالنا. اللهم انصرنا على أعدائنا نصرا مؤزرا يا رب العالمين. اللهم احفظ إخواننا لهم ولا تفتنا بعدهم واغفر لنا ولهم وآخر. So tonight, inshallah, there's going to be a bit of a show and tell, hence the mashallah the technology, Brother Muhammad. And I thought instead of sitting and describing with my hands, I seem to do every time, actually be using Google Earth to show you some of the things that we talk with respect to what happened where. And tonight, inshallah, we're going to cover. So just as a quick reminder, we are now in which episode? Which of his are we in? 9. Third. Anyone else? So far we have 9 and 3. 6. Okay. Any more numbers? Third year of Hijrah, right? Roughly 2 years after that, right? We're well of the third year of Hijrah. Of Prophet occurred roughly in the first months, and there was a period. And there and it wasn't just a defeat, it wasn't just a magnificent defeat, it was also humiliating, because what happened that was they not just killed but captured many of the key leaders. Like speaking, was an Arab superpower, right? The Arabs had multiple tribes at the time that were considered strong and respected. They had major caravans, had trade routes, they had diversity. No matter where you Hajj, worship, so Quran is an important power, and they still felt that massive slap on the face from Abu Sufyan, recruiting people for the army of Badr, and recruited poets. So poets would search for the all the time. They would to go. And some of the Arab vicinity of the slaves to go and fight. They pack up and how many people do they have to go? Initially, 1,300. They had 1,300 people to back. So they 1,000 on the back. Now, people together, 3,000 fighting men, including 400 horses, 400 knights. I remember we said, like, at the time is the modern day equivalent of a tank. So they have 3,000 fighting men, best equipment, and they have 400 horses, right? And the Prophet, when he finds this out, he starts to track them on the way from Mecca to Medina. And when he gets the confirmation, the Prophet hears he's in Qadar. Lightning south of the Masjid al-Nabawi. The Masjid al-Nabawi. But the Prophet, oh, here we go. Masjid Quba. See that? Right there. Masjid Quba. See the gray? The gray right there. I don't know if you can't see my finger. The little gray thing down at the bottom. That is Masjid Quba. Nabawi, by the way, that Google Earth. You know, how many people here know Google Earth? Yeah, it's right. By the way, the Prophet said, time of the day of judgment, when the Prophet said he enters every state of the world except for Medina. And he comes to the outskirts of Medina and he stands on the mountain and he points to the masjid and he said, this is the white masjid of Ahmed that we're not permitted to get close to. Because the Prophet said angels to guard Medina. So Medina is the only city that disaster. Ferrari or Lamborghini and you don't have the speed limit, you have radar detectors, that's it's so moving them along, moving them along. They actually get there in 7 days. The Prophet finds out by how, so they're tracking them. They know where they are for about 3 days. Okay, and so the army is now. The Prophet now knows when he is in that he moves to, he goes to the Masjid al-Nabawi and he forms a war camp. And he forms a war camp. He calls the scene the close Sahaba. He says to them, one more time, with 3,000 men, very well equipped. What should we do? Right? And say, Ya Rasulullah, we need to prepare for the fight. And you know, like we're ready to go. You tell us what we need to do. The Prophet ﷺ then has another meeting, and in the second meeting, how's it different to the first one? You're now a leader, and you have news to deliver that's hard. You first bring your close counsel. The next meeting has the extended leadership team, right? So the first meeting may have like the VPs, the second meeting has the senior directors as well, so to speak, in nowadays terms. So the next meeting now has more companions, and the Prophet ﷺ says, they're coming to fight. What should we do and how should we prepare? The younger Sahaba say to the Prophet ﷺ, let's go and meet them in open warfare. Let's go on and meet them in open warfare. The Prophet ﷺ also conveys a dream where he sees 3 key things. What's the first one? Cows being slaughtered or cows being killed. The second, the sword breaking, mashallah. The third, he enters into a protective fort. He goes into a protective fort. And later on, we find out that the cows being slaughtered are effectively the companions that get killed in Badr. The sword being shattered or being broken comes out. Some of them Mufassirin say with Uhud because that's where they retreated to, right? Okay. It's safer to fight a larger number from the city. Why is it safer to, by the way, today there's going to be a lot of military questions. Today is mainly Sunnah and military questions, okay? So there's not going to be a ton of Quran. We're going to cover the Quran next time. So why is it safer to fight in a city? Sorry? Because you know the city well. That's a really good reason. Anyone else? Wait. Harb al-Asabat, okay? The brother gang warfare, okay? It's already in the city. That's fantastic. Anything else? Guerrilla warfare. Whenever you have a superior force with superior weapons, the city kind of equalizes it. Why does it equalize it? They can't take advantage of everything they have. They can't maneuver in the way they can on an open war field, right? The horses won't be able to move. Like, the men don't know the city as well. There's blown up buildings everywhere. They can't get around them. You could pop up from anywhere you can and you can attack them. You know what I mean? And the Prophet ﷺ also says we could use the rooftops of the city. We could use the rooftops to actually, rain down on them, for example, arrows and so forth. And he even said roofs, right? The Prophet ﷺ says this. And who's the one that agrees with him, ironically? Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul, the leader of the agrees with the Prophet ﷺ. Now, remember, he's a seasoned warman, but he's also a major munafiq, the major is saying. So the Prophet ﷺ gives the khutbah, he incites the Muslims to go out. By the way, let's talk about this for a second. Is this later? I'm just looking at it. Comes later. Okay, I want to ask you the hard fiqh question now. We'll keep going. So the Prophet ﷺ goes to his house and he gets dressed in how many coats of armor? Two. He gets dressed in two coats of armor, not just one. And the Prophet ﷺ comes out, and the extended leadership team is still there. And you can imagine that the older companions reprimanded the younger companions. It was better to stay in Medina. So they go to the Prophet ﷺ. And by the way, they were not just eager to defeat the mushriks. Some of them, many of them hadn't participated in Badr, and they wanted to demonstrate their loyalty and their bravery and their eagerness of the Prophet ﷺ. So, Allah, if you want to stay, we'll stay in the city. Like don't be forced about our decision. What was the Prophet's response? No messenger before they meet the enemy. This is a hadith in Bukhari. And remember, we talked about Prophet very specific to messengers, not specific to men. Does anyone remember what they were? Fasting, 72 hours continuously. Anything else? Marriages. Okay, and then this question of the armor, right? This question of the armor. So the fuqaha have said the messengers in particular have characteristics and that they that the rest are compelled to do. And I gave the evidence from the Quran and so forth about some of these things. We also learned this issue of taqdeer and istikhara, and once you've made a decision, you commit to the decision. So there's two things that I said a Muslim does before any major decision. The first one is istikhara. The second is shura. Shura and istikhara. Once you've made istikhara, you're putting your faith on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Once you've made the shura, you've got the opinion of the experts, and then you move on. So the Prophet ﷺ is now committed to decision, and he moves on. He basically gets a battalion led by Mus'ab ibn Umair. By the way, he's right in the middle. We'll see this in a second. So Mus'ab ibn Umair radiallahu anhu is leading when they go and stand up in Uhud. He's right in the center. Sayyidina Mus'ab ibn Umair. And by the way, he plays another role, Mus'ab ibn Umair, which is he is the flag bearer. So the flag bearer plays a very important role. Why does the flag bearer play an important role? Because everyone targets him. Okay. It's a gathering place. MashaAllah. It's a symbol of success of the army. If the flag is still up, remember in those days they didn't have walkie-talkies and modern communication. But if you're from far away and you see the flag is still up, what does it mean? We're doing well. We're doing well. So keep charging. If the flag goes down, it means we have a problem. Right? So this was indicative of a problem in the army. So the flag bearer played an extremely important role. And we'll also see that Sayyidina Mus'ab ibn Umair actually becomes a shaheed on the day of Uhud. He becomes a shaheed on the day of Uhud. The Ansar are led by Usayd ibn Khudayr. And then we'll see in a second that Al-Habab ibn al-Mundhir becomes a leader of the battalion of the Ansar through a promotion that we'll just talk about in a second because of the defection of Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul before the start of the battle, before the start of Uhud. They leave from Medina. Here is the Masjid al-Nabawi. So I'm pointing to the Masjid al-Nabawi in white. Can you see the dark up at the top? I can use the, okay, I just don't want to. Okay, yeah, good. So can you see the dark? Oh, can you see this thing up? Let me just use my finger. Can you see this thing up at the top? This is Uhud. This is Uhud. The whole of Medina, the whole populated city of Medina was effectively the size of the masjid. So everyone in Medina could fit in the masjid. Where is Al-Gharqad, Baqi' al-Gharqad here? Right over here, the area to my right. See the desert area right over here? This is the Baqi'. This is the Baqi', right? And they basically travel north, so they're going that way, north, follow the road all the way to Uhud. This is Uhud. This is the mountain that the Prophet ﷺ said, we love him and it loves us. This is the mountain that the Prophet ﷺ said is one of the mountains of Jannah. This is the mountain where the Prophet ﷺ stood on top of it with Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab and Sayyidina Uthman ibn Affan and Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. And what did he say? Udbut Uhud, Uhud, calm down. On top of you is a messenger, a Siddiq, and two shuhada. So this is the mountain of Uhud. It's a massive mountain range. I just want to give you a sense for how big this mountain range is. It's a massive mountain range. Does anyone know how long it would take to drive around Uhud in a car today? Just imagine you had a four-wheel drive and you're able to drive around the mountain. Any estimates? How? No. It's more like 4 hours. This is about a 4-hour journey. To drive in a car around Uhud, about a 4-hour journey. So when we go there and we stand, generally speaking, kind of right over here in the nice touristy area and take pictures and all of this, you see this little square right in the middle? What is that? No, right here. The graveyard of the Shuhada of Uhud. This gray area is the graveyard of the Shuhada. We go there, we enjoy ourselves, and we take a look and we take pictures. We don't really understand how massive this is. By the way, the other thing we don't understand how massive it is what? The the bottom side of Uhud. Anything else? Where is Jabal al-Roman? Where? MashaAllah, it's right there. Can you see that? Can you see this small mountain right there? Here. I'm sorry. I don't know how to do the tablet thing. So let me just point. Oh, the laser. I'm not that sophisticated. So see the parking lot. People here went to Medina. Okay. So when you go there with the bus, you know how they park the bus and they come out and have a bunch of people saying Saudi things. You're right there where the bus stop is. You understand? You're right there where the bus stop is. That mountain right there is the Jabal al-Rahman. This used to be a much bigger mountain. You understand? At the time of the Prophet ﷺ, today it's like a simple climb. It's not really even. This is the Jabal al-Roman. The distance, roughly speaking, I'll explain more in a second, between Jabal al-Roman and the point of the Muslim and where the Muslim army was only about 350 to 400 meters. And there's the Prophet ﷺ devised a brilliant plan where he got to Uhud first. So even though Abu Sufyan was charging and it took him 7 days to get there, the Prophet ﷺ had the advantage of distance and had the advantage of getting there first. And he parked the army right at the entrance of this mount over here, right inside what looks like a little cove, right? And he lined up 100 meters between where the Muslim infantry is lined up and the Roman would be to their left. So the Roman covered the left flank. That open area is covered by the Roman, right? And we'll see now that hadith of the Prophet ﷺ tells them. So what he actually did in positioning army the way he did was what? What did he do? He created a bottleneck. Has anyone heard of a battle called Thermopylae? You're a military historian. Oh, you have. What was that battle? MashaAllah, between the Spartans and the Persians, what did they do? Yeah, right. Yeah, that's it. So this is not military history. This is not Islamic history, but it's really important what he just said. What's your name? MashaAllah. So the Persians tried to invade the Persian Empire, Kisra, whatever, Kisra the first failed at invading Greece, right? The second is this army, Greece from the north, and they also, if you understand that the map of Greece has land that connects it to the same and then there's also called the Sea and a little massive size. Basically, they have people lined up, mountains to the left and to the right. It doesn't matter that there's 10,000 of them. Do you understand that technique? Here as well. So he did it in such a way where even if they come with 10,000 men, the 400 cavalry their size. And this is part of the genius of the Prophet. Okay. On their way to Uhud, as they're walking up to Uhud, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, before we get to this ayah, you guys are wasting our time. Those are saying, I'm going to join you. Jihad comes in two forms. There's offensive and there's defensive in terms of battle. So he says to them, come and fight the offensive. That time, some of the companions in any of these contexts, we're not blaming them or helping anyone. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with all companions without exception. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Holy Quran, رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُمْ وَرَضُوا عَنْهُ. So whenever we describe these situations, these are normal things human beings get into. It doesn't matter what you are, who you are. Any human being would argue about money or status or whatever. This is a normal thing. So I want you to not misunderstand when we talk about the companions and the things that happen in any kind of negativity. You understand? This is the best generation that came after the prophets and the messengers, right? So the two groups in particular that argued about whether or not they should continue or to go back are the group called Banu Salama. Does anyone heard of Banu Salama? Where's Banu Salama? Banu Salama they live in the north of the Masjid al-Nabawi. Banu Salama are right about in this area. See this mosque here, this masjid here? That's roughly where the Banu Salama is. Does anyone know hadith of the Banu Salama? They go to the Prophet ﷺ and they say, Ya Rasulullah, you built your masjid too far. Like, you built your masjid too far. We can't come to pray to the masjid every day. Right? You're in Bothell, we're down in Linwood. And the Prophet ﷺ told them, pray where you are. And then he has another hadith where he told them, if you walk to the masjid, if you come to the masjid, even though it's a higher effort, you get a massive reward for going. For every step that you take, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala writes your reward. So the Banu Salama start to say, should we go back? And the other is a group of the Aus called the Banu Haritha. And after they have the argument about what, should we go back? Should we stay? Should we go back? Should we stay? What do they decide to do? They all stay. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also speaks about this in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِذْ هَمَّ الطَّائِفَتَانِ مِنْكُمْ أَن تَفْشَلَا وَاللَّهُ وَلِيُّهُمَا وَعَلَى اللَّهِ فَلْيَتَوَكَّلِ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes, He says, remember on the day when two of you started to argue and you almost, what is tafshala? Tafshala. To lose. You almost became losers. In other words, if you made the wrong decision, you would have lost, right? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is your wali. What does wali mean? Sponsor, protector, ally. So the two of them were so happy that these ayat were revealed in them. Afterwards, when anyone go to the Banu Salama or this particular priest, they say, hey, we have Quran revealed in us. What do you have? So they were very, very happy when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this about this, right? So both of them actually boasted about this. This piece about Wallahu waliyuhuma, right? Allah is their protector, Allah is their ally, right? So the 700 now reach Uhud. So they started off with a group of 1,000 men. They reach Uhud. And if you remember, I told you that a group of the Yahudi tribe actually showed up, and the Prophet ﷺ asked if they had accepted Islam. They said no. He said, we don't need them, right? We're going to go on without them, right? Amongst the things that happened on the way to Uhud, so all of this is now, we're tracking the Prophet's journey from Masjid al-Nabawi to the start of Uhud, is they go through, but by the way, this whole area was palm groves. So you can imagine they're not taking the highway, so to speak, they're taking the palm groves, right? So as they're passing through one of the palm groves, it is owned by a blind hypocrite. And he hears an army of 700 people, you're going to hear passing through your land. So he's like, who goes there? Who goes there? Is this the army of Muhammad, or is this Muhammad and his men? If so, I don't permit you to pass through my land. And he starts to pick up bricks and throw them at them, even though he's blind. Even though he's blind. And one of the companions is about to take care of him. And the Prophet ﷺ says, دعوه أعمى القلب أعمى البصر. Leave him alone. He is blind in the eye, blind in the heart, right? Blind in the heart. The Prophet ﷺ, when he left in a hurry on Friday, they prayed Dhuhr and they prayed Asr. Question, can you pray, on what day was it? Friday, it was Jum'ah. Can you pray, so let me say this properly. They prayed Jum'ah and then they prayed Asr. Can you pray Jum'ah ahead of time? Can you pray Jum'ah ahead of Dhuhr? How many people? Hang on. How many people say yes? Raise your hand. 3 people, 4 people say yes. 5. Inshallah. Okay. Anyone say no? You cannot pray before. You cannot pray 2 people. What are the rest, man? This is about 5 against 5. What is this? Is an election? It'd be like, we'd have to go back and revote. So the question is, can you pray Jum'ah before Dhuhr? Ahmad ibn Hanbal, yes, mashallah. The brother is exactly right. So actually, in the fiqh of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, in the Hanbali fiqh, the Jum'ah is considered a separate prayer from Dhuhr. The Jum'ah is considered its own category of Dhuhr, right? And in other madhab, it has to be at Dhuhr. So I'm not trying to create a fitna. What time we pray Jum'ah? I just want to be clear, but I just want to give that because the commentators of of Sirah speak about this point, right? They speak about this point of the Prophet ﷺ probably having prayed Dhuhr or Jum'ah ahead of the time of Dhuhr in order to get to Uhud in time. When they get to Uhud, they pray Maghrib and Isha together. They pray Maghrib and Isha together. Next day is going to be Saturday. Next day is when they're going to face off against the Quraysh. So you see the timing of what's happening. Okay. Okay. The next day, the Prophet ﷺ in the morning is inspecting the army, and he creates a rule. And he says, if you're under 14 years old, you can't join. Who's under 14 years old here? Okay. So you guys wouldn't be able to join. Inshallah, is the blue belt is here? You're here? Yeah? Okay. Okay. You're the blue belt, right? Yeah, okay. Alhamdulillah. So I just want to make sure I got the right person. So the Prophet ﷺ creates a rule, right? If you're 14 years old or younger, you cannot join. And he starts to inspect who's shown up. And a lot of these kids effectively have sneaked in. They've snuck in, right? I just want to read out some of the names. By the way, I brought this book because this is one of my all-time favorite books. So this is a show and tell on Sirah. Has anyone heard this book? What's this book called? Rahiq al-Makhtoum, in English. The Sealed Nectar. Who wrote this book? This man is a genius. Like seriously, You can read um, you can read the sayar of previous previous generations of companions and ulama like Ibn Hisham and Ishaq and many others, and they're fantastic. But he has the notion of and simplify. Yeah, I mean, he didn't invent, but you know what I mean? He simplifies and he compresses. Right? This particular edition, I got this one from Mecca about 6 or 7 years ago. It's fantastic because, first of all, it's a fantastic print. I take a lot of notes, so I scribble all over my books. But it has the ayat and the hadith in green, which I personally love. In addition, it has maps of these situations. In addition, it has pictures, which I personally love in books. I love a book with pictures. Okay, so this is a genius of this man. So just advice if you want. So the reason it occurred to me is he has a list of all of the ones that the Prophet rejected. I'm not going to read it because it takes a few pages. But amongst the most famous is Zayd ibn Thabit. Who's Zayd ibn Thabit? What's he known for? Let's talk about some of these companions. He was one of the best, most amazing. He wasn't when he started to collect and review, he was one of the QA engineers. You understand that? Sayyidina Umar, senior companion, the QA, the Quran, right? This is Zayd ibn Thabit. The second is Abdullah ibn Umar. His father's there. He's like, take me with you, Dad. Take me with you, Dad. Prophet send him back. Abdullah ibn Umar ibn Khattab. Zayd. Usama ibn Zayd, right? So Usama ibn Zayd, radiallahu anhu, was by now he's about 11. After the death of the Prophet, the Prophet was gathering an army before he died to send and face off. And Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, this boy, 17, 18 years old, and Sayyidina Abu Bakr has a fantastic leader. Was still Sayyidina Usama ibn Zayd that went behind that day, he was not able to participate. Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, any ideas? What's he known for? Hadith. He's a scholar on his way to Uhud, Zayd ibn Arqam. He's another alim, right? So these were people that were amazing in terms of their willingness to participate. They wanted to be soldiers. They had other skills that existed at that time and became famous for later, right? The companions never can only be this and can only be that. The companions never had confusion in our head. Fantastic faqih, but I can't be both. Why can't you be both? There's nothing in Islam that stops. We should encourage our children to be excellent. You need to be a fantastic Muslim. If you want to be a scholar, you should become a scholar. You know, in our, you know, no such thing. The companions never had this problem that we seem to have nowadays. Now, I said we have exceptions. He had exceptions. Okay, so here's what happened. So there was a companion called Rafi' ibn Khadij, and this Rafi' ibn Khadij was a young companion, and he starts to cry, and his family now goes to the Prophet ﷺ, and they're like, "Take Rasulullah." After the Prophet he's under 14 years old, I'm not taking him. They're like, "But he's an expert archer. He's an expert archer. He would be one of those guys that you want to put on the mountain." So the Prophet says, "We'll take him." So when that happens with Rafa and the relatives beg him, another companion called Samurah ibn Jundub, he walks up to the Prophet and says, like, "Hey, this is not fair. I can actually beat him up. And I've beaten him up many times. So if you're going to take him, you have to take me." So they're the only two that the Prophet makes an exception for. One is in the country and one is in the country. And okay, so this is what the Prophet ﷺ does. Now, the mountain of the Rumah has a name. Does anyone know the name of the mountain? Jabal al-Rumah is what we call it now, but before it had a real name. It's called Jabal al-Aynayn. It's called Jabal al-Aynayn, right? This is the actual name of the mountain. And the Prophet ﷺ puts up on it the leader called Abdullah ibn Jubayr. Abdullah ibn Jubayr. Okay. Now I'm going to tell you the ahadith that are most recounted about Uhud. But before I tell you what they are, can you guess what they are about? This one should be, okay, it's not that, okay, it's maybe not obvious, but it's not that hard of a question. Most hadith are narrated about Uhud are the sayings of the Prophet ﷺ with respect to, fill in the blank, the archers. The archers. The instruction he gave to the archers. So now they're prepping up and they're lining up. And the Prophet ﷺ says, I'm just going to read to the Prophet defend our backs. If you see us slain, do not come and assist us. And if you see that we've acquired the bounty or we've won, do not share it with us. In other words, hold your position. The other hadith narrated in Bukhari, the Prophet ﷺ says, إن رأيتمونا تخطفنا الطير فلا تبرحوا مكانكم هذا حتى أرسل إليكم وإن رأيتمونا هزمنا القوم ووطأناهم فلا تبرحوا حتى أرسل إليكم. If you see us snatched into pieces by birds, in other words, we have been utterly defeated, do not leave this position of yours until I send for you. If you see that we have been defeated the enemy and crushed them, do not desert. Hadith narrated about what the Prophet ﷺ said to them. He said, protect us with your arrows. Horses will not attack if they see the arrows coming. And by the way, the start of the battle, that's exactly what they did. We'll see this in a second, because the Prophet ﷺ lines up the army at the foot of the mountain. So, let me get up one more time. So, okay. So the Prophet ﷺ lines up the Muslims right in. You know how to use the pen? Oh, the pointer. Oh, with the mouse. Okay, that makes sense. The Prophet ﷺ. I can use that. Okay. Can they see where I point when I do that? Okay. Okay. Fantastic. Great. So the Prophet ﷺ now has stood up the army in this area, basically this opening. The camp of the Prophet ﷺ is in the back here. This is where the Muslims are lined up. The Quraysh are standing over here, and I'm going to show you slides with pictures now in a second, and they're attacking this way. The Muslims are attacking this way. The archers are over here, fending off the infantry, fending off the cavalry of the disbelievers, and at the same time, you could say protecting air cover from anyone that comes on this side. So they play a critical role. They play a critical role here. So the Prophet ﷺ says, attack their cavalry so that they can't attack. And he says also another hadith, make sure the enemy doesn't surprise us from behind, whether we're victors or losers, until I tell you. So all these hadith are narrated about the Prophet ﷺ instructing the companions. Now, it's the morning of, and the Prophet ﷺ pulls up his sword. And he says, who will fight with the sword? What would you do? Me. Like, everyone is jumping up and down going, me. And the Prophet ﷺ still holds on to it. And then he asks the question one more time. He said, who will fight with the sword? بِحَقِّهِ. And everyone now pauses for a second. Okay. And they say, what is حَقِّهِ ya Rasulullah? What is the right? What is the right? And the Prophet ﷺ said that you take it and you use it until it breaks completely or it's completely unusable. Unusable, right? And the Prophet, oh, by the way, the first person his hands was who? The first person to raise his hand to take it? Nope. Zubayr ibn Awwam. So the first, that was Zubayr ibn Awwam, the very first one. But the person that actually got it was Abu Dujana. Now, Abu Dujana was one of the fiercest martial arts warriors that they had. You understand? Abu Dujana plays a role later. I don't know if you remember in which battle. Khaybar. Khaybar. And he was known to wear what? Red turban. Or right? He's like, if he puts on his red turban, get out of his way. You understand? He was that kind of guy. Like he shows up in the village, he's all decked out with his swords, and he's a samurai guy that will take on the whole village, right? He's that guy. And so he gets the sword of the Prophet ﷺ. When he gets the sword of the Prophet ﷺ, he marches with a lot of pride and showing off in front of the mushriks. He walks around like, hey, you know what I mean? And the Prophet ﷺ said, this mishya, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hates all the time, except for this particular occasion. When you're showing, he's not doing it to be proud, he's showing it for bravery. He's showing it to tell the others, hey, come and get me if you can, right? So this was Abu Dujana and the sword of the Prophet ﷺ. The armies are now lined up. Abu Sufyan is in the middle. I can't remember who do you have the slides here? How do I flip from thing to thing? Sorry, I forgot everything you said in the morning. Okay, so okay. It's Android. That's why, man. It's like, okay, so we don't have a PowerPoint. It's here. No, it's okay. It's okay. I got it. Okay, so here we go. So this is about the picture that we were seeing. Presentation. Yeah. Presentation. Here we go. So this is the Prophet's camp, ﷺ. That was the mountain of Uhud that I was showing you. This is the archers, right? Jabal al-Rumah. Jabal al-Rumah was not that small at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. It's not like a little thing that you could climb like you can today. How many people climbed Jabal al-Rumah? You climbed Jabal al-Rumah? You climbed it, mashallah. So all you guys, when you climbed it, you brought back a piece of it back to Seattle with you, and that's why it keeps shrinking. Okay, mashallah. If you go, you should climb it. I'm not telling you not to, but I'm just saying that's why over time it shrinks, right? So this is Jabal Rumah, and you can see now how the Prophet line climbing, and you can see this line, beautiful picture here, because these are really descriptive. The line is compressed. Uhud, the tip of Uhud, and between Jabal. If that's a high mountain, and pretend that the archers, they snipers or they can attack this way, they can attack this way. They have a 460 view of anything that's coming against. First thing that happens is, the position that he tries to show the sword between the Muhajirin and he basically sends them to the front of the line. Remember, you could take the arrow range. You're basically and so the first man runs up and he says, Abu Sufyan, you got the good civilians back, meaning the people of Mecca. And they flying across and aspiring on to become the leader of Medina. So he said, his name was Abu, right? And so he goes and they start to curse him. They did the exact same thing to Abu Amr. going on the other side. How? That's my cousin. That's my cousin. That's my. In fact, you know, again, this is where this did anyone here watch the series called Khattab? Omar? You should. Okay. By the way, if you're trying to learn Arabic and you want to learn a little better, go watch the series is unbelievable. But anyway, you know, him, the job that's over there, and he captures the, you know, the zeal of the Quraysh. But there was like a lot of poetry about urging you and do this and do that, you know, and reward you when you come back and this kind of thing, right? Okay. So the women are there and they are cheering them on. So then they have what's phase one of the battle? Mubaraza. Hey, send me your best guy, send me your black belt, send me your blue belt. And the guy that shows up from the Quraysh, his name is Talha ibn Abi Talha, and he shows up on a camel. He's all decked out in armor, and the armor comes down to the knees, right? The armor comes down to the knees. And the person that comes in front of him is Sayyidina Zubayr ibn Awam. In other narrations, I heard it was Ali ibn Talib, but the predominant narration is it was Zubayr ibn Awam that went in for a blue belt. Can you go over here a second? A little demonstration. Okay, we need another. What's your name? Dad. Okay, can you get up? No, stand up. Okay, so let's do a demonstration. You're with each other. You're doing a little martial arts trick. Can you take your hands out of your pocket, please? Because you're about to get attacked with a sword. Can you attack him with a sword? Oh, that was a sword? Okay, so let's say they're both martial artists. Let's say you punch him. What don't hit him and don't punch him for real, please. Okay, this is just a demonstration for the audience because they don't know this stuff. You guys know it really well. Can you just throw him a fake punch? Can you block it? Like, dude, you're blue belt, block it. Any way you want. Like, block the punch. Who gave you the blue belt? Okay, no, I'm kidding. Okay, good job. So he blocked it. Then what would you do? You punch him in the face. Okay, he's not going to do that, but that's how he would counter. So show me the block again. Hang on. Do the punch. Block. Punch him. Don't punch him. Okay, good. So that is typically what you do in martial arts when you're learning, which is you first block and then you counter. Since he's an advanced blue belt, he can do both in one technique, right? So can you do it both together? Hit him with a punch. You see that? So he blocks and attacks at the same time. This, by the way, is a big part of what you learn from Kung Fu. Good job. You guys can sit down, mashallah. So this is exactly how it starts off. Coming and swinging at Sayyidina, and literally they say he was so quick. He blocked it with one hand and he hit him with the other hand so quickly. He took off his leg, and we didn't even see how fast it was. All they saw was that the man, by the way, the other guy, all he had was his shield, but he had no armor. He falls on his back, and he's basically finished for the day. Right? That was the very first. Thing. And the other narration where Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib, as he falls back, he calls for mercy, and he by our relationship because they're both from the Quraysh. Leave me alone. Okay. Sorry. Abu Sufyan is now getting ready to charge, and Abu Sufyan looks at the tribe from Quraysh called Banu Abd ad-Dar, and what job do they have? Carry them. And Abu Sufyan says, he goes, do you guys remember what happened on the day of Badr? What happened on the day of Badr? Do you guys were carrying the flag and you lost it? In fact, one of you guys got killed and the other guy got captured in a POW. Are you sure you can really do this job? He's trying to also antagonize them. And they get in. Abu Sufyan. One of us alive. This is our honor. We're going to do this. You'll see what we do. You'll see this. You'll see that. And they literally make the statement, so long as one of us is alive, or one of us is standing, you'll see what we do. And literally every single one of them fell in the battle. Every single one of them. There was 10 of them, and they all got killed. Every single one. Predominantly by Sayyidina Hamza radiallahu anhu, Ali radiallahu anhu, and Abu Dujana radiallahu anhu. Okay. Sayyidina Zubayr ibn Awam, does he have a relationship with the Prophet? Cousin. He's his cousin. He's his cousin, right? Zubayr ibn Awam narrates in Hadith Bukhari later on. He says, at the start of the day of Uhud, I was a little bit sour because I didn't get the sword of the Prophet ﷺ, even though I raised my hand first, right? So as the battle started, I watched Abu Dujana to see how well he's going to do, right? So he's in the battle, like watching him from a distance. And he says, there's no man that stood in front of him except he whacked him. So I was like, this guy's pretty good. Right? Like maybe he did deserve it. Maybe he did deserve the sword. And he says two things about Abu Dujana radiallahu anhu. He says Abu Dujana didn't meet a single person except basically he finished them off. Abu Dujana actually went after one of the mushriks that was going after and killing the wounded of the Muslims, and Abu Dujana finished them off. And Abu Dujana saw someone from the other side encouraging the men to go out and fight. He chased after that person, took out the sword, and was about to. The person, by the way, was covered, face was covered, and the person screamed. The hadith says, "Wal-walat." What does wal-walat mean? A woman screaming. He found out it was a woman. Abu Dujana didn't kill her. By the way, I don't even know who she was. She was Hind, which shows you the initial attack that the Muslims had from that point on. It was like a bullet against the mushriks. It completely neutralized their size and their strength. And they, when people say they literally went through them, because Abu Dujana wouldn't have been able to that describes this in a second. So he let her go. He didn't kill her. He let her go. And Abu Dujana said, he said, I felt embarrassed for this honor, this sort of prophet. Let him go. Like this is Abu Dujana. Ishaq says, Hamza radiallahu anhu went in with a sole mission. What was the sole mission that he had when the battle started? To go after the flag bearers. To go after the flag bearers of the Quran. That's on that day as well. And Sahih Bukhari does a narration by Sayyidina and so bad that we saw the women at the back pulling up their skirts really high, and we saw the khulkhan on their feet, the khulkhan, the little anklet that they wear. We saw that. We saw all with the skirts pulled up. How far we defeated them. Okay. So this picture. Okay, here we go. This is good. This is actually the attack of the Muslims starts to retreat. The center line of the Quran is defeated. Special about how he retreats, which is what? He doesn't retreat in a panic. In the 1967 war against Israel, where Egypt was miserably defeated, there was an infamous general that was actually close to Gaza, who led a division. And he's the only one that came back intact. He's the only one that was able to make it all the way from Gaza, no support, no air force, nothing. When the Israelis had effectively invaded Sinai, he was the only one able to bring it back together, right? Which takes sound mind and strategy and how he moved around the mountains. And he's by the way the strategist around the 1973 war. Does anyone know his name? No. Shazli, right? He was that man. Khalid ibn Walid, I'm not drawing comparisons. Khalid ibn Walid, when he retreated, he retreats in order. He doesn't retreat like every man for himself. He doesn't do that. He actually keeps his division together, right? He starts to walk back while he's keeping an eye on what's going on, right? So he's retreating, but he's calmly watching what's going on the other side. He's like, yeah, we pretty much had it, but let me just see what happens. It's at that point in time that the archers now start to leave their positions. Now, I just want you to understand, because sometimes as Muslims we don't kind of get how these things happen. This takes time. This takes time. So what I'm saying is that it wasn't just that, oh, it started, the Muslims defeated them, the archers came down. This happens over like a 3-4 hour cycle where the Muslims smash through. That probably takes time. The Quraysh start to withdraw. The women start to run away. The Muslims on the front line are feeling pretty good about this. So they're like, we have it. We finished these guys off. Let's start to now pick up the bounty. Let's start to pick up the ghanim. So they're now more relaxed. Oh, Quraysh are long gone. You understand? Maybe I'm going to take off my armor because I'm picking up the ghanim. I better use both hands. I'm not going to be able to pick them up while I have my weapons. You understand? So I'm now a little bit more relaxed. Sayyidina Khalid ibn Walid is watching all of this. And then his last straw was when the archers started to come down. Now, the archers had a debate amongst themselves by most accounts of Sirah. And the leader said, the Prophet ﷺ told you to stay here. Right? They're like, but wait, but we already won. We're done. Look, they're already collecting the bounty. We're missing out. No, you should stay here. That's what the Prophet ﷺ said. We should stay. No, I'm going to stay. I'm going to go. I'm going to stay. I'm going to go. And eventually, how many people ended up leaving? 40. 40 of them left. How many were there total? 50. 80% are gone. You understand? 80% of them are gone. Sayyidina Khalid ibn Walid is observing that. Another opinion, by the way, is that, let me see if it's here. Actually, yeah, this third slide is pretty good. So Sayyidina Khalid ibn Walid now, has anyone heard that he turns his army around Uhud? Okay, that's actually not true. So if you go back to the map, running around Uhud would have taken him a whole ton of time. He doesn't actually run around Uhud with his cavalry. All he does is he encircles them from the back, right? From the back of the mountain of Rumah. So he does come from the back, but he actually comes back from the mountain of Rumah. He wouldn't have been able to do this in time. Like if it's taken him 5 hours, it would have been long finished. You understand? The other thing, by the way, that I think it was Br.Aala that mentioned this, or someone else. He said that in that area is what you call in the desert a ravine. You know what a ravine is? A ravine is like a shallow valley. Like if the water comes down, it flows in these natural canals that ends up creating the ravine. He says the ravine is deep enough. This is the other opinion, by the way, of what Sayyidina Khalid ibn Walid did, radiallahu anhu, on that day, which is he put his cavalry in that ravine so that if you're above level, you couldn't see where he was. You understand? He's pretty well covered, right? And the third opinion is his people actually started to disappear, but he kept them together. He started to call them back. He's like, hey, they're coming down. It's our opportunity. Come back, come back, come back. By most accounts, he had between 100 and 200 horsemen. When he turned around, he goes back. Incidentally, had he fought any other major battles before this one? No. His leadership skills popped. His strategy, his bravery, how he thinks about warfare popped here. Where did it pop as a Muslim? Mu'ta, right? So this is now starting his career as a general, but Mu'ta is the first time that he does it as a Muslim general, right? So when Sayyidina Khalid ibn Walid sees this, he turns around and he climbs up the mountain. Most people think he didn't actually need all his horses to go and finish off the 10 people that are left at the top. So more than likely they get divided into 2 parts. One part goes up to the mountain to finish off the archers, and the others, where you see this arrow, they now wrap around. And what are the Muslims doing a few hours into it? They're collecting the ghanima. They're pretty relaxed. And then suddenly they see Sayyidina Khalid coming from behind. The natural instinct of anyone, when you feel safe and you think you've won, to see an army coming from behind, especially these guys coming on horsemen that are pretty decked out, is to panic. So panic starts to ensue. Panic starts to ensue in the Muslim army. And this takes time. So I want you to understand that it wasn't like, oh, this happened within 30 minutes. This was nothing like that. This actually takes time, which is part of the reason why, if you're on the front line where you see that, the tip of the arrow is, they're already collecting the ghanim, and then they're faced off with with Khalid ibn Walid. Incidentally, the archers also played a magnificent role at the beginning of the battle, which is to fend off both the attacks of Khalid ibn Walid and Ikrimah ibn Abi Jahl. So most of the narrators of Sirah say they fended them off 3 times. So the cavalry at the start of the battle tried to attack the Muslim lines 3 times, and 3 times the archers on top of the mountains actually, blew them away and scared them away. Um, the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha, she asks the Prophet ﷺ, what was the worst day you've ever faced? Was it Uhud? And what does he say, alayhi salatu wasalam? He says, no, it was Ta'if. Ta'if in Mecca. Remember when he went to Ta'if in Mecca and they wouldn't accept him? He said Uhud wasn't the problem, it was Ta'if, right? So this is just another hadith mentioned with respect to this. Now the other thing, and we're not gonna finish this today, but the Prophet ﷺ, who's still in the back, so the tent of the Prophet ﷺ is roughly where number 4 is now. The Prophet ﷺ sees them coming. And if you're a general in the middle of an army and you see them coming, and you only have 3 or 4 people around you, what happens with your bodyguards? What do? They surround you, and what do? Shield you, and they take you away. They go, sire, the war's over. We want to bring you to safety. You understand? Like, let's go back to people that like military history. Has anyone heard of this guy called Napoleon? When was he defeated? Waterloo. He was defeated in Waterloo in Belgium, right? When he was fighting against the British. When Waterloo was clearly, the French were finished. The French also started off winning, by the way. They were destroying the British, and then the French were finished. He goes to, his bodyguards on him say, this is over. Like, there's no point in you staying. Let's now take you back to Paris, and maybe we'll round up another army to come back and fight them again. The Prophet ﷺ does the exact opposite of that. He gets up and he calls out to the Muslims and he warns them. He warns them that the enemy is now coming from the back. So you can now imagine, after they thought they won, they're picking up their armor, they're picking up their weapons, they're getting ready to fight one more time, and they don't have a chance. Another thing happened in the middle of this confusion, and some of the hadith mentioned shaitan. Shaitan calls out to the back lines of the Muslims and says, they're coming from behind you. And the people who are actually coming from behind were the older companions that went, where the Prophet ﷺ also told them not to fight, including the father of Zubayr ibn Awam, was a very old man, insisted in staying in Uhud. And so the Muslims turn around, he's dressed up in armor, and they kill him by accident. Right? The other man that was also killed on that day is the father of Jabir ibn Abdullah. So this is Muslim to Muslim killing because they didn't know that they were from the Muslim side. The father of Zubayr ibn Awam, what was his name? Al-Awam. I love you guys. Okay. So, by the way, was his kunya, was his title, not his name. So they called him Yaman because the Abs tribe used to refer to the Aus of Medina as they're from Yemen, Yemeni. You know what I mean? Okay. So this was Hudayfa ibn Yaman. By the way, another famous hadith here. He asks the Prophet ﷺ, he said, so what are we considered? Are we considered Muhajirin or are we considered Ansar? Because he's not from Medina, but he was in Medina before the Prophet ﷺ went. And the Prophet ﷺ said the both. Right? You counted both Muhajir and Ansari. So he was one of the other shuhada in Uhud. The other very famous hadith is and so this is where Hamza is also Hamza radiallahu anhu was fighting bravely on that day. And we know that Wahshi, who was a slave in Mecca, he was owned by a man called Jubayr ibn Mut'im. So the slave owner was Jubayr ibn Mut'im. And he saw Hamza throwing the spear, and it was magnificent. And he said, you're my man. I'm going to take you specifically to Hamza. The other story, of course, it was Hind ibn Utbah, but he was actually owned by Jubayr. So both of them were aligned on the fact that Hamza had to be killed because they wanted to get revenge on Hamza for the killing of the people of Badr. And Wahshi now recounts the story years later as he's living in Iraq and he's blind. But Wahshi, by the way, when did he accept Islam? When? After that. So he actually escaped Mecca. He's like, he's going to kill me for sure. He's going to kill me 100%. And then the companions go and call him and they tell him, people that show up with the Prophet ﷺ and they take the Shahada, he doesn't hurt them, right? And so Wahshi comes and he takes the Shahada from the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ was pained actually by him, right? But anyway, Wahshi, by the way, Wahshi also kills who later on? Musaylim al-Kadhdhab. And he was one of the major participants in which other Ghazwa? Yarmouk with Hussein Khalid al-Walid. Wahshi was one of the main spearmen, right, of Yarmouk. And so Wahshi is now, he's there, and he actually says this to the companions way later on. He's practically blind, and he lives in Iraq. And they go to ask him specifically, this is an explanation, how did he kill Hamza radiallahu anhu? And he basically says, he offered me my freedom, and the only reason I went to fight was for my freedom. I had no interest in killing the Muslims. I had no sides to take, so to speak. All I wanted was my freedom, right? And all he did on that day was track Hamza radiallahu anhu. So he says, I went from rock to rock, from bush to bush, from tree to tree, until I found the perfect opportunity. Hamza radiallahu anhu just killed someone. I can't remember his name now. He was, I don't remember what he did. He was, he had a specific role. He just finished this guy, and Wahshi came from behind him and threw the spear so hard that it went through his back and came out of his front, right? And he says, Wahshi says, Hamza radiallahu anhu turned around with his sword raised to come after me, and then he became shahid on that day. Wahshi says, I waited, by the way, likely this happened either after. Took action, but he got his spear back. Wahshi actually ended up point to get his spear back, right? And we know this thing about him. She mutilated him, and so forth. And when the Prophet saw him afterwards, he was so upset and said, "I'm going to take 30 of them and do this to them." Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, the ayat was that only hurt them the way that you've been hurt, don't exceed. And if you have afw and maghfirah, that's even better. And the Prophet ﷺ said, I'm choosing for this ummah to always have afw. So even when the enemy is there, you're permitted to have afw for them. So there really is probably a lot more to say and a lot to list out. We're going to get to the next time, because there's a lot more to say because afterwards the Prophet actually goes back and he retreats into the mountain. The Sahaba now start to join him, and people start. So there's companions that run left and right into the mountain. There's some that get killed in the middle, and there's some that go back to defend the Prophet ﷺ because he calls for them. And by the way, part of the confusion that happens on the side of the Quraysh is they killed Sayyidina Mus'ab ibn Umayr, who was carrying the flag, and he fell on his face. Sayyidina Mus'ab ibn Umayr looked the most like the Prophet ﷺ, and many of the people of Sirah say he was wearing on that day the cloak of the Prophet ﷺ. So when he fell on his face, they thought they had killed him, and they started to yell, Muhammad is dead, Muhammad is dead, meaning there's no more reason to fight. Right? When they saw Sayyidina Mus'ab ibn Umayr fall that way. The Prophet ﷺ retreated into the mountain, and we'll resume it next week because there's ayat from the Quran that come down, and then we'll take some of the key lessons from Uhud, inshallah. By the way, this was beautiful. This was hopefully this was helpful for you to just see some of these things. Okay, let's make a dua. Inshallah. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim. Allahumma barik ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم اغفر للمسلمين والمسلمات والمؤمنين والمؤمنات الأحياء والأموات إنك سميع قريب مجيب الدعوات. اللهم اغفر لنا ولإخواننا الذين سبقونا بالإيمان ولا تجعل في قلوبنا غلا للذين آمنوا ربنا إنك رؤوف رحيم. اللهم نسألك رضاك والجنة ونعوذ بك من سخطك والنار. اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا. اللهم كن مع إخواننا في فلسطين. اللهم انصرهم نصرا وارزقهم يا رب العالمين. واخر دعوانا ان الحمد لله رب العالمين. Oh, quickly, next week I'll actually won't be back until inshallah the first Sunday of the new year. I have travel to do, so I won't be back. So we'll do inshallah. Yeah. Next week there's that event, and then and then I'm going to be gone until the first Sunday.